Dear Mr. Han, thanks for accepting our request. It's
My
been
pleasure.
already more than a year we were chasing you to have this interview. Finally, it's happened. It is really important for us what you think about the architecture and the future of architecture in the Middle East. Because when we search among the famous Turkish architects, we see a couple of names, and Han Tümertekin is one of them. And you have your own style, your own thoughts, your own philosophy for the architecture. That's why we're really interested why you choose this profession and what happened you started to study in architecture.
Well, as far as I remember, from my early childhood, I was interested on putting together things. And I was observing the daily life. And, for example, I remember very well when we were with my father to the garage and people repairing our car. These kind of things was very impressive to me. Then, now I understand very well that I was attracted by design, not specifically designing volumes or spaces, but in a way, design was something that was really attracting me. And I was born in Istanbul, and I was born at 58. So during 60s, early 60s, Istanbul was, of course, not as populated as it is now. And I had the chance to have contacts with so many real stuff, the real people, real handwork, and of course much more mechanics as well instead of electronics.
Yeah.
Then from my early childhood, I decided in a way, not maybe consciously but unconsciously, to become an automotive designer. And by the time I am a son of a geographer couple, and my father was an urban geographer, then by the time my observations or relationship with the city, a city such as Istanbul, became much more serious and powerful. And then, instead of cars or mechanics, spaces became much more interesting to me. Then finally, I ended up by becoming an architect.
That's good. So you just followed the design process, you just followed the designing, automotive designing, then you jump into the architecture.
Yeah, I remember the ships crossing the Bosphorus.
Yeah.
Every time I was in that ship with my mother, I was taking her to the machinery room, watching the mechanics doing the grasping.
Repairs, yes.
Yeah. And then it was something fascinating to me. And then the scale changed.
Yes.
More broader, more larger city, a city such as Istanbul, and then architecture.
That's good. That's good. Thank you. So, every architect has his own design process, and there are some important factors in this design process. Some architects focusing on starting from site, some focusing on form, function, and some other focus on context. What are the main factors for you to start a project? How do you start to design a project as an architect?
First, if possible, I start everything, mentally speaking. I take my time. I think this is crucial these days. I stop, I breathe, and I start understanding not just the physical context, but the social and cultural one as well. And I start observing, collecting data, all kind of data. Well, much more maybe trendy name of it can be parametrics.
Parametrics.
We will discuss on that.
Yes.
Okay. But the first thing I do is to collect every data that I can, as possible. Put them on the table, and instead of immediately reacting and starting design, I really every time resist for not designing, but asking questions and questions and questions. If possible, all the questions that I can ask. And then finally, I take my time to reduce them, all of them, to just one question, which is crucial one. Then you solve everything.
Yes. So
it's not magical, but it's really hard time to raise a multitude of questions, to create those questions, answering and answering and answering, and finally reducing to just one, the question. Once you achieve that level of, in a way, refinement, immediately you solve the problem. After spending so much time on problem, then the design phase starts. I know that for my new clients, I know that the feeling that I create is, instead of showing them wonderful, impressive renderings, I ask questions and they say, but how he will do that? He will achieve that level of maturity on the project. Sometimes I can see the discourage that they have in their eyes, but I don't know other way to do. Then I need time. I need time.
Yes. So you start your project by asking questions and answering them by the design process.
Yes, and collecting data.
collecting data.
but not physical ones. I think this is another issue that I take in consideration. The light, the sounds, social life and tissue, the possible construction techniques available, these kind of things.
That's awesome. So we had a deep dive into your projects and we realized that you have some kind of minimalistic tendencies. I don't know if I'm right or not. For example, in B2 House, which you won the Aga Khan Awards, you have designed a two-story house with simple geometries made out of concrete and handcrafted stone. What were the reasons to push you to this simplicity in this project?
Not minimalism at all.
Not minimalism
I'm sure on that. First, the program was so simple. The brief by my client was just, I would like to go there, look at the sea, listen to the music, and read some books. And that's all, he said. So, an extremely simple way of living. That was one issue that I take always in consideration. To me, the only way of doing architecture is not building. This is another issue that we can discuss. But there is architecture because there is life. But buildings are not the dynamics of life. Then life is the dynamic of architecture. So the program is crucial to me. Second thing was about the brief. Well, that was what he was dreaming to do in this house. And second thing was a building, if possible, with no maintenance. So instead of complicating things, we must simplify them.
So doesn't this mean a minimalistic look or tendencies?
Well, that, you know, when I start a design, I force myself to have the clearest mind possible, which is something impossible, of course.
Yes, it is.
But this is what I'm trying to do. Clear everything and concentrate on what I have in front of me, in my hands. That's why I need time at the beginning of any design process, not just collecting data, etc. But first, that's why I said, first I stop and I take my time to create a neutral, if possible, state of mind.
I understand.
And then you start working on the real problems, specific problems. And instead of trying to stay minimalistic with your free mind, you can do what you must do instead of, or you can do what must be done.
Okay. So you say it's not a minimalistic look, and it is just a matter of you had no option.
That's it. Yes.
You had no option to do that.
And when we stay at B2 House, what is achieved there is that the building is anchored to that specific place that you can't move even 20 centimeters that building. If you move it, if you move one wall 15 or 20 centimeters, you demolish everything. Everything.
Yes.
This is another thing that I'm always trying to achieve. Then instead, I frequently say that I'm not specific, but hyper-specific.
Yes, thank you. So you also had projects in other countries, for example, in Turkish mission buildings in Strasbourg is one of them. What were the main challenges to design for a foreign country which had a different cultural background, different architecture history? What was the main challenges?
Well, you know, to me it's not a big deal to build in a foreign country or at the surroundings of my office. The identity is not something preconceived to me. That's for sure. I many times ask myself the question, is there any identity? Or when I start a design process in Strasbourg, shall I use different techniques or approaches? Or is there anything that I take in consideration instead of taking in consideration another issue, you know? I know that every time I don't know what will I do, but I know how to do it. Regardless to context or country or culture, this is something that works to me. When I pointed out hyperspecificity, my tendency on hyperspecificity, I was in a way answering your question as well. No matter where I am, I concentrate on where I am and what I have in my hands. But let's do a comparison with B2 and Strasbourg. There are some similarities.
And some differences.
And some differences, of course. The scale is different, or
yes,
many kind of differences. But at B2 House, we knew that the building will be built by local people. That was the logical way to do it. We could do other preferences, having a team from Istanbul, let's say, or giving up, saying to the local builders, you do it the way you know. But we choose a third way, which was creating kind of a dialogue, understanding what are their capacities, possibilities, and forcing them, not much, just to move one step further. And it worked perfectly, wonderfully. I remember very well when we finished the building, the master builder, who became a very good friend of mine, and I worked with him for more than 10 years, maybe 15. He said, looking at the building at a distance, we were at a distance, he said, Han, you know, I have done the same thing that I have done for more than 30 years. But the result is totally different.
Yes.
That was the resume of all the process, wonderfully expressed.
Yes.
That was the aim, not imposing them something totally new and different, knowing them, understanding them, dialoguing, and at every building, and after B2, we collaborated with that team 4 or 5 times.
Other houses or
Other buildings, many houses, well, proportionally houses, but the final building that we collaborated was that
Yes.
olive oil factory. Then the scale was
changed.
changed and was a bit big for them, but we achieved to collaborate in a perfect way, and the result was perfect again. And in Strasbourg, the similarity, I'm talking
Yes.
about similarities. We, after observing, understanding the context, we decided to use a local stone, which is called Grès des Vosges, from the Vosges mountains next to Strasbourg at Alsace. But that time, we said, okay, we will use it because we have a very good French construction company. And we know that France has a very powerful and innovative construction heritage,
Yes.
like Gustave Eiffel, Freycinet, and this kind of people. We said, okay, we will push a bit contemporary technological techniques, and we collaborated with the construction company's specialists to use the biggest pieces of that stone, of Grès des Vosges, in history in our buildings. Then they had to develop new technologies, new equipments to fix to the facades, the stones, and another step for them as well.
Yes. Thank you. So when we look at your architectural career, we see that you're not disconnected with the academic activities and universities. You were a lecturer, and you are a lecturer, and also you were coordinated. You had coordinated many studios in universities in Turkey, United States, like Harvard GST, Austria, Paris, and other countries. How does this connection with the students and education affect your architecture?
Well, you know, my contact with students and academy is based on responsibility. This is before affecting my architecture. This is the basis and this is the atmosphere that I feel in it. First, this is another level of responsibility to me. Besides, it helps me to update myself. It helps me to ask new questions to myself without sometimes, or in majority of cases, without having the capability to answer all of them. But I start asking questions at every contact with students. Another thing is, by their presence, I learn a lot. I learn a lot about new technologies or new kind of trends. Then I stay connected, and before saying any word to them, I think a lot on what I will say. That's why I'm at every occasion present at the schools as tutor or as lecturer. This is something that I will do till the end of my career.
Do you think the education is improving, or is it getting better, or is it getting worse?
Well, you know,
at least in the countries in the Middle East, not in Europe. Or
well, I was lucky and honored to be a jury member for the Omraniya Awards in Amman 10 years ago, and recently I was a jury member for the 10th cycle last summer, and I had the chance and privilege to compare or to evaluate those 10 years in about architecture education in the Middle East, or mostly in the Arab countries. And what was really impressive for the jury, that we went through the 10th cycle jury reports, and we have seen that no matter the composition of jury, every year, that means every cycle of the awards, mostly same things were said, which is the presentation quality of the projects are always evolving, and the tendency about creating interesting and impressive forms compared to the projects taking in consideration the context, the surrounding, cultural and physical heritage of the country or the city was proportionally was the majority. The projects trying to do interesting forms and this kind of things,
Yes.
Are the proportionally are the most problematic. I think because when we talk specifically about Middle East, which has still historical background and heritage,
Yes.
I think it's a pity.
Yes.
Instead of looking around, which is the easiest way, then there is the sun, the heat. When you get on the street, you see too many data or inputs, parameters, voila, about the real life.
Yes.
Instead of looking around, they look on
Side.
on the answers of the problems that they don't have, which I think it's really a pity.
Yes, thank you. So nowadays in the world of architecture, Middle East is one of the hearts of the gigantic projects with a big amount of budgets, like the Louvre in Abu Dhabi, which was recently opened. And most of these projects are designed by the European-based architectural firms. How these projects could define the identity of the Middle East architecture, and what is your point of view on this?
Well, every time I read or I hear a European architect explaining his or her design in the Middle East or any Arabic country, they start talking about the cultural heritage of the country or people and blah blah blah.
And this is the least thing they pay attention, I think.
This is another issue, but what I find interesting is that when they talk about any of their design in Europe, they never mention this kind of things.
Yes.
Which I find really interesting. When it comes to an Arabic country, everybody starts talking about the musharabiyas, this kind of things. And when they design a building in Paris, nobody talks about
The historical background.
Palais de Versailles or something like that, you know. This is, in French they say bon pour l'Orient, and it is good for the Orient, you know. I don't like this approach, you know. But fortunately, Louvre Abu Dhabi is a very nice building, very successful architecture.
Yes.
But when it comes to explain the design, I don't think an architect needs to talk about these kind of things.
Because the buildings itself just
the building
expresses what are they. Yes. Thank you. And you know that we're living in the era of codes, algorithms, computer-aided designs, and AIs, artificial intelligence. This method of design in approaching is expanding in every aspects of design, such as interior, fashion, industrial design, jewelry, and mainly in architecture. How do you see this revolution is going? Are you trying to keep your office connected to this world of codes, algorithms, and parameters, or not?
Well, technically speaking, I'm always positive about any developed or new issues. I'm open to that. But still, I'm at a phase that I have the tendency to make use of them as tools. Well, as a generation, I think this is the most developed way of approaching to the issue is that. And let me confess that to design, the dynamic of design, to me, being always the life and the daily life, I don't think that this kind of novelties can change drastically architecture or design. But when it comes to defining the question or the problem, I don't need them. So, to solve the problem, sure, I make use of them.
So you say they are just tools, and of course they are tools, and I really accept that. You say they are just tools to draw, they are just used to answer the questions or find a way.
Yes, this is the way I make use of them. Maybe I'm old school, but my design approach doesn't need them.
Okay. How could you define parametric design? Are you a supporter of these kind of designs or not?
I am. I think I am, and I feel that I am a parametric designer.
Okay.
Any designer must be
a parametric designer.
A parametric designer. Let's define it properly. But I know that there is another so-called parametric design, which is mostly about forms.
Kind of.
Kind of.
Yes, the world around us is parametric also, because from the first day of the architecture started and humans started to build something for themselves, they are using parameters to build them for themselves. But
now, why defining separately instead of saying design, parametric design? Because without parameters, there is no design.
There's no design, yes. But the thing that happened in 2008, that this word was just coined, it was to put these parameters into the computer and get the design out of it. It was like...
I know, yeah, that's why I always say tools.
Tools, yes, they are tools.
Yeah, let's confess.
Yes, they are tools.
We agree on that.
Yes, we agree on that. Yes. Okay. Shall I move to the other question?
Sure.
Okay. What is the importance of the innovation in your office?
Oh, I think we call it innovation or not. I always say that we will not have the same answer, or we will not repeat the same answer as far as we will not have the same question raised, which means, in my understanding, innovation permanently. And once I was asked to define architecture in one word, I was forced under pressure, no time. Then suddenly I said, redefining. And everything was clear to me from then that yes, what we are doing permanently during a day as architects, we are redefining everything every time. To me, a door is not always a door. In our office or in our office personally, let's define it specifically. I never say window or door. I say
Openings. Yeah, interesting.
An opening will be every time, or can be at every occasion, defined in a new and innovative way.
Yes.
Because if you say window, then visually you have a window in your mind.
Yes.
This is something to avoid, definitely.
Good. What should be the role of the architect in the society and your viewpoint?
Which architect?
Good architects.
Okay, let's assume that we are talking about good architects.
Yes.
Still, I can say that they can change the world. That's for sure. In a good way or bad way. But if we assume that we are talking about good architects, they can positively change the world. And that's the motivation that I have. Every morning I start the day saying that, how many possibilities we'll have during the day to change the world into a good one.
Does this mean to connect culture with architecture or something like this?
Well, I'm much more interested on affecting the days of the lives of ordinary people in their daily life, instead of doing great gestures, influencing at the first sight people. I like to infiltrate in their daily lives without showing them that things are now better than before my intervention.
Okay.
Just a dose of ego.
Yes, a dose of ego. Thank you. Guys, thank you so much for following our page, and thanks for joining our live video. We are here with, again, I'm just expressing where we're talking about with Mr. Han Tümertekin. He's one of the great architects of this territory. And we will ask your questions. We have 2 questions left. I will ask them at the end of the live video. Do we have the questions from the comments?
Yeah, we have a few of them, but most of them were answered in the interview anyway. So,
Not any specific one?
some of them were, like, what's his vision in...
Who was asking?
Tinky LTT was asking what's his vision in future architecture.
Well, I was feeling a bit alone when I was feeling at a distance with the future. And once, very recently, a couple of years ago, read an interview by Louis Kahn. I'm not feeling alone anymore. To me, future is not something that we can define from today. If we define it from today, to me it doesn't mean that it's future. To me, future is totally unknown or must remain unknown.
So you say...
If I have any idea about future, it's not anymore a future to me.
So you say if we think about the future and the design in the future, we're not thinking on the future. We're thinking for now.
Yeah,
it's not future.
Yeah, this is the feeling that I had all of the time.
Yeah.
Then I gave up. Now I say no future.
Yes. Good. Any other one?
Yeah, Rohi asks, how does parametric architecture incorporate the experiential aspects of the design, the sense of belonging and the feeling one would have when experiencing a space?
It's a very good question. This is something that I discuss with my students several times, that I ask them, how can you live your capacity of creativity to the capacity of a software? How can you leave it to that, in a way or other, to that limited software? Then, yes, it is true that architects and architecture students are making use of a group of softwares, and immediately you see the similarities that their projects has. Then, as a tools, it's okay, but they don't have any software has not the creative capacity of one person, of a real man.
Yes. In other words, computer just thinks instead of us.
Yeah. Still, we don't know the future.
The future, yes. Maybe robots will gonna kill us. Nobody knows. Any other questions?
We're getting lots of highs and hellos from Aisha Sultani, Julia, Luciano, Sapida.
Thank you. Hi.
Context, Logic, Art.
Thank you.
Yeah, from all over the world.
Okay, this live will end at 60 minutes. You will save and share it, then start it over.
Okay, we have one question from Zainab Azizan. How do you predict the world's... Well, this is almost the same question, but it says, how do you predict the world's future architecture? Is the future for ecological ones, in an ecological aspect?
Well, I'm always very careful about using this kind of terminology, you know. Ecology. I believe that a good design has all of them. Being conscious about consumption, being conscious about energy save. We don't need to dividing issues and name them separately. A good design responds
To everything.
to everything.
Yes. Good. Any other questions?
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment. Arnold says, computers are just machines, the hand and think of the, thought probably he meant, of the architect makes the difference. Okay, so...
I totally agree.
Yes, we agreed on that.
Yeah.
The computer is just a tool.
Okay.
Yes.
A wonderful tool, let's say.
Yes, it is a wonderful tool, but is it happen to you for your students that you offer them to use computer, or you offer them to use sketches instead of computers? Which kind of designs, which kind of presentations do you prefer for your students?
Well, not the presentation, but I insist to force them to make use of their hands, drawing by hands and drawing sections.
Yes,
and you know,
sections.
Yeah,
yes.
and for more than 3 or 4 years, I say section will save the world.
Yes.
I believe on that. If you draw a section, which is not just drawing a section,
the design,
to build mentally the space. If you draw a section, you must understand and define everything about that building or about that space.
Yes.
You can't avoid any data on section.
Yes, good quote. Sections save the world.
Yeah, I believe on that.
Thank you. Any other questions do we have?
Lots of spectators from Brazil. Hi from Brazil. Hi from within Turkey, Finland, all
everywhere.
Hi everybody.
Yeah. Almost the same questions that were answered earlier on in the interview. So
that's
nothing
fine.
new.
I will just
more
enter
questions
to my
later on.
Okay, I will just enter to my 2 last questions. According to your architecture experience, what does architecture mean?
Oh, life. To me, really, to me, architecture doesn't mean just buildings. That's for sure. It's space to me. And space is not limited to just build space.
Just build the space. Yes. I remember you just once said you were walking in a seaside. You just saw people. Yes,
4 pillars.
Yeah, 4 pillars with lights.
Lamps.
You just.
And it was magic.
Yeah.
During that night, people were partying, and no one was stepped out that
lines.
That lines with lights, with bulbs.
Yes, just to build in space.
That's it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Should we take more questions? This live section is going to end very soon.
Yes.
So just a couple of more questions. Alaturk Akiramet asks, which architect's style do you like in Turkey, especially about modern architecture?
in modern architecture?
Yeah.
Mehmet Konuralp.
Okay.
Do you suggest us to interview with him?
Sure. Please do. He is my role model from AA, London.
Awesome. We will ask. We will ask requests. Okay. Any questions?
What does he suggest to students? Esmnur asks.
We will ask this one.
Okay. The last question.
Yeah, the last question. Also, you can answer. What is your advice for students, young architects?
To look around, to observe,
To care.
and to care, and to stop. Really, to stop. I think this is something very difficult to achieve. Not just stop physically, but mentally.
Mentally stop everything. And
Mentally stop everything and
just be in the place.
be in the place
Yes.
and look around.
Yes. Thanks.
Um,
Questions?
I mean, Shafa asks, I'm assuming she's from the Maldives. She says, how can we initiate something like organic architecture in a small country like Maldives?
Tough question.
Well, this will be maybe a help to young architects as well. By my experience, it is approved that no matter what kind of architecture you do, if you spend incredible time on your design, you do again and again just one skirting. You take your time, you redefine it several times, millimeter by millimeter. You take control of any component of your building. If you take control of each millimeter, no one, nor the client or the construction company or the project management guy
I refuse them.
will refuse them. You will convince everybody.
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time, and thanks for having us. This was a great honor for us to be with you. Do you have any final words?
No, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to me, and the questions prepared and raised by you was very helpful to express myself. And thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.